Hi, this is Stuart, and I want to talk to you today about document design, about how you lay out information so that it's most accessible for readers. What I'm going to talk to you about today is based on a book by Robin Williams, not the comedian Robin Williams, but a different, the author Robin Williams, who wrote a wonderful book called The Non-Designer's Design Book. I recommend it highly. It's a terrific book filled with examples of effective layouts for information. What Robin Williams describes in the book, one of the things is 4 design principles of contrast, meaning making sure that visual elements are different, that you have adequate changes in color, in size, in font face, things like that. Alignment, basically margins, that you line things up. Repetition, that you use certain elements over and over again so that people understand that that element means this is a heading or this is text, things like that. And finally, proximity, grouping things together. Now you might ask, why would we bother to do this with instructions? Let me give you a couple examples of that. First is that we're busy people. Most of us don't read at work, especially for pleasure. We read to get things done, which means we need a quick way to find information, which means we need to be able to use text, space, and graphics to convey that information. Now, to give you a good example of how that works, I'm going to show you a slide here for just a few seconds, and I'd like you to tell me, does this person, how many degrees does this person have? How many certificates does this person have? This is a paragraph about their education. Tell me how many degrees and certificates they have. Now the odds are that slide was not up long enough for you to read the paragraph and tell. But if it was laid out more like a resume, like this, then you'd be able to see very quickly that this person has 2 degrees and a certificate. So if you were reading a lot of resumes, would you want to read this kind of layout or paragraphs of text? I'm assuming most of you would be interested more in this kind of layout. And that's basically using document design. Now you also might ask, well, what does this have to do with instructions, since that's what we're working on this week? Well, if you were putting together something, or if you were learning how to do something, would you want to read instructions that look like this? Big paragraphs of text, or instructions that look like this, that very clearly have a sense of each step, what has to be done on each step, and so forth. And what I'd like to show you is how document design gives you a better set of instructions. So let's go through those again really quickly. It's contrast, alignment, repetition, and proximity, which is an acronym for CARP. And it's why we've got these nice little carp floating around on some of these screens. So let's go through them. Proximity. Even when you write a sentence filled with words, you're using proximity, because proximity is grouping things together and then leaving extra space to show that some things relate to each other and some things don't. So putting a space between words lets people find the borders of each word. In the case of the resume that we've been looking at, notice that there's a bit more space above certification, which helps us see that there's education and 2 entries. They're grouped a little together visually, and then there's certification and another entry. That's using proximity. And notice here in the instructions, there are essentially 8 boxes that are grouped together. You know, if you look here, a couple examples, how they tend to be grouped together visually. They're closer in proximity to each other, the text below and the picture above. And that helps us see that kind of grid. The second principle is alignment. Alignment is basically the use of margins. A basic illustration is typically a letter. An old-fashioned letter that you would send through the post office typically has 2 addresses. How does the postal carrier know which address to send the letter to and which is from? Which letter indicates who sent the letter? And lining up one address in the middle and one address in the upper left gives the postal carrier an idea of where to send the letter. In the tent pinching instructions, notice that there are columns that are lined up, and these are aligned both vertically and horizontally. If you were to look across the top, there's a horizontal alignment. As a matter of fact, the little use of boxes, light red boxes, lines up, emphasizes that horizontal line. So it uses alignment well. Third thing, repetition. That's using similar elements for similar purposes over and over. So for example, in a resume, you want your headings to look like headings. It's the same font, they're bold-faced, they're slightly bigger. You want, in this case, the person chose to use a different text for the body of each section. Also, there's a repetition in the alignment, the way things are lined up. And there's also even a repetition in the how information is presented. Degree first, major second, school third. Degree first, major second, school third. The people are very consistent here about where things appear, and that repetition helps a reader anticipate where things are coming. Now in the tent pitching instructions, there's also repetition. There are the numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They're always in red. Always the image comes second. And then there is some text in English, French, and I think probably Dutch that appears below in that order. Finally, contrast. Back to the resume example, because the headings are in boldface, they're a slightly different font, they're bigger, they stand out. And that contrast, the bigger, bolder font versus the smaller, lighter font, helps people find the headings very quickly. And when it comes to the tent pitching instructions, there's certainly the contrast between red and white. The red numbers help us find each step very quickly. That kind of contrast helps. The different colors for each kind of text would help someone who speaks French to find the French instructions, someone who speaks English to find the English instructions. So that kind of difference helps. So there are the 4 principles: contrast, alignment, repetition, proximity. They certainly work in instructions. I want you to consider those as you put your instructions together. And also, over time, I'd love for you to get a sense of, start noticing how contrast, alignment, repetition, and proximity is used in all sorts of places. Even a place like Facebook, you can see there's alignment. There are 3 main columns that are lined up in Facebook. There's repetition. People's names are in a dark blue. Usually there's a picture, their profile picture to the left. So there's a lot of the basic design principles that makes a page like Facebook relatively navigable, even with a lot of information. If you have questions about document design, let me know. I will talk to you this week.